So to start with, can you just introduce yourself? What do voters need to know about you?
Bob Zybach, I'm 77 years old. I've never run for office before. I'll never run again. I'm working for my great-grandkids. I've got two of them that live in Corvallis. I'm a seventh or eighth generation Oregonian. They're 10th generation, descended from Oregon Trail pioneers and a Swiss dairyman, which is where I got my name. I've got a PhD in the study of catastrophic wildfires from Oregon State University. And before that, for more than 20 years, I was a successful reforestation contractor before government contracting specs and spotted owls into that industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, could you kind of elaborate a little bit on where you're from and also what your career path looked like up until now?
I'm from Woodland, Washington, but when my ancestors moved there, it was still part of Oregon, Lewis River Powells. I grew up in Oregon, graduated from Grant High School, went to Portland State for a while in the 60s, got my PhD from Oregon State, got a master's degree in oral histories, my studies catastrophic wildfire, and during my reforestation career, I'm one of only two people I know in the Northwest that have personally planted over 2 million trees. So I was pretty active and pretty good at it for a lot of years.
Wow. Yeah, thanks. So can you say, why are you running for Lane County Commissioner?
I'm running for Lane County Commissioner because a problem we've had for the last 20 years has not been resolved or addressed. The federal government says they're supposed to be managing these lands for the county. 1897 Organic Act, 1937 O&C Act, 1908 Articles of Agreement, and they've just been ignored. And what's happened in Lane County, University of Oregon, beginning in 1991 at Warner Creek, that was the start of anti-logging demonstrations throughout the United States. So instead of not having wildfires, we had one single wildfire my whole career. In 1966, from 52 with the Vincent Creek Fire till 87 on the Silver Complex, we had the Oxbow in 1966. In the early 90s, after my business had gone gunny bagged and I was going to Oregon State to get my degrees, I was on the cover of a national magazine, which pretty much ended my career. I made the prediction very clear that if we follow the Clinton plan, we're going to have catastrophic wildfires, we're going to have disruptions in our rural communities. 100% right, but because I was challenging the models, the global warming models, it was pretty much canceled. The one thing I could not understand and still don't is why in the hell are we not salvaging those trees, making and paying taxes. So in the early 2000s, we went on welfare, Secure Rural School Act. We're depending on people from around the country to send us their tax money to fix our schools. The schools are going downhill. The rural communities in District 5 have suffered greatly. They're not recovering. Blue River burnt, still recovering. Oakridge and West Fir, major economic disruptions. And so after years of writing articles, I've written several books, lots of lectures, said, well, maybe politics might be a way to get attention of these politicians. They're talking about homeless or garbage rates, and the problem is catastrophic wildfires, lack of employment in our rural areas, toxic smoke, dead wildlife, and poor schools. Those are the problems, and we've just been letting them fester for decades.
What experiences are you aiming to bring to the county commissioner office then? What makes you qualified?
Well, qualified is pretty easy. I've watched them work. I would say the fact that they have not represented our best interest in doing something about these fires, doing something about the smoke, makes me more qualified. I've got a PhD in the topic. I've got 20 years experience on it. They're not even addressing the problem. When I talk to them about things like critical things like immigrant salvage, they don't know what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about the reburn on Charlton, and these are in District 5, they don't know what I'm talking about. Instead, they go over in an airplane, Ashley Blow with some environmentalists, Inglesby, and they're saying, this is why we have roadless areas to protect our old growth. And the place is a devastated desert. The soil's been sterilized, the lack of salvage created the immigrant fire this year, and Charlton Reburn, and Warner Creek, where it all started for the whole United States, reburned. So these people are probably well-intentioned, but as foresters, they're incompetent, and they're destroying our local communities and our forests.
You know, you've kind of already answered this, but just to be sure, what do you think is the top challenge facing Lane County right now, and how would you like to see that addressed?
The top challenge is wildfire control and restoration of our rural communities through active forest management. We've got to restore active forest management. This idea of roadless areas and wilderness areas has been a documented failure, cost us trillions, literally, of dollars. Smoke has killed tens of thousands of people. Millions of wildlife are dead. The landscape is just horrible to look at. It's ugly. And this is not what we were given. This is not what was here for the last 10,000 years. People have always actively managed the lands using various tools and populations and so on. So that's the concern.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah. So Lane County's sheriff and district attorney, often talk about how under-resourced they are. The sheriff points out he has 3 rural patrol deputies at any point, and the district attorney recently called the staffing levels at his office a looming crisis. Mm-hmm. So how would you like to see those challenges addressed as a commissioner?
We know how to fix that. The O&C Lands are a good one. They just said we're going to restore past logging levels. They said 75%, which is restored since '53, but 75% of nothing is nothing. Since 1990, the cut on BLM land has gone way below levels. It was set up to be, in 1937, sustainable. They logged over 1 billion feet a year from 1960 to 1990 without reducing the volume. I would argue with maybe the methods and the specs that they used, maybe even the reforestation specs. But the land is capable of growing about 1.3 billion feet a year. Lane, Douglas, Jackson, and Josephine County get the bulk of that. When they were operating, we had hundreds of millions of dollars that went into the counties, into the police, into the schools, into the roads. When we took that out, we went on welfare. At first, the welfare payments were similar to logging payments, but they have to be renewed every year, and it makes us dependent on taxpayers in the other areas of the United States instead of independent and helping them to cover those types of costs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, last June, a task force put together funding recommendations to the county commissioners. Yeah. And their core recommendations were either a payroll tax or increased property tax through a special district. How do you feel about those ideas?
I think they're disgusting things, and why I've avoided politics for lots of years. We don't need more taxes. We need to put people to work. And the people that are working are being unfairly dinged. If we follow through with BLM and open up the lands again, or if we start salvaging these dead trees, maybe creating cogeneration facilities in Diston or Dexter or so on, these problems would be resolved immediately. It's just, we're doing this to ourselves, and government bureaucrats and people into carbon sequestration and those types of carbon credits are causing this situation and have been for decades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In the last couple of years, we've seen reductions in state and federal support for Lane County's Health and Human Services Department in particular. I've written stories about LIHEAP has recently been cut, homeless shelter beds have recently been cut, there's been reduced service at county clinics. How can the county respond to state and federal cuts like that?
By stop being dependent on it. We're dependent on welfare. We've got a bunch of bureaucrats running around saying, give us more, and now we've got different states saying, no, get it from the millionaires, get it from the billionaires, get it from the gas tax. Meantime, if elected, my very first thing would be to rescind Heather Buck's $25,000 raise to herself for doing nothing. There's been 200,000 acres of land that have burned up under her watch, and nothing's been done to restore them. if we had gone into those lands, we would not need to be begging the US government for money. We would not need to be hiring bureaucrats to go and try to attach it. We would be producing significant income and paying into the treasury rather than getting in line and hoping for handouts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you know back, historically when as you mentioned, the county relied on timber funding, was
Yep.
Health and Human Services a part of that?
Undoubtedly. I was older than you during those years. I ran a business during those years. We didn't have anybody living on the street, nothing. We had kids with a sophomore education and a good work ethic that could go out and get a family wage job pretty easily if they were semi-athletic. Health and Human Services, I am guessing they probably had something like that, but it would have been a much smaller organization. Most of those, like the homeless industry or the wildfire industry, they've grown out and become tax dependent, and it's resulted in more fires and more homeless. You just watch that develop over the years. The more budget that goes into it, the more problems we collect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In 2023, Lane County Commissioners voted to move forward with the CleanLane Resource Recovery Project. Yep. And that project has since stalled among land use challenges, and also county staff have said the county isn't collecting enough waste to fund it.
Yep.
Do you think county commissioners should continue with CleanLane?
No. It should be the vote of the people. It should be the same thing with the quarry out at Dexter. I think it's the same group of people that voted themselves a $25,000 raise. They're just doing a lot of damage, and we need to go back to work. We know how to fix these problems, these wildfire problems, these aesthetic problems, these dead wildlife problems, these dying community problems. This has been going on all during Heather Buck's tenure, and she's done zero about it. Tried to look for some handouts, basically, and been maybe successful. I don't know. Not according to the people I talked to.
Yeah. So I mean, you said you oppose CleanLane.
No, I didn't say I oppose
okay.
it. I said it should be up to the vote of the people. I
Okay.
oppose the county commissioners arbitrarily making decisions like that, because that's the same group that voted themselves a $25,000 raise. I don't trust those people for those reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I guess, so let's say in this hypothetical that the people vote down CleanLane.
Yep.
How would you suggest the county gets out of its contract then?
That's kind of a technical thing. Jake would know the answer to that, so I would ask the experts. Our serious problems are wildfire, air pollution, unemployment in our rural areas, and we can pretend like CleanLane is a big problem, or we can pretend like homelessness is a big problem, but those are mostly self-inflicted. And on the scale of things, if catastrophic wildfires are 8 or 10 wildfire risk, CleanLane's a 1 or 2 or 3, and homelessness might be 1. We just created those problems.
This year, an investigator found that a county commissioner threatened to fire 3 employees who filed HR complaints against him.
Huh.
Is it a commissioner's responsibility to ensure Lane County is an inclusive place to work?
Are you talking about Loveall?
Yeah.
Okay. Inclusive, that is a word that means a lot. It's kind of like they're using, now they've completely switched the name of conservation. Conservation used to mean wise use of resources. Now it means no use of resources and anti-logging, so they've diverted it. So inclusive, are we talking about academic ability? Are we talking about racial diversity? Are we talking about age groups? It's just a buzzword that I think is used to the advantage of bureaucrats and disadvantage of English speakers. What's it mean to you? Well, how are you defining inclusive?
Well, I mean, I guess, we spent some time trying to workshop that question, right?
Yep.
But I guess the intention of this question was, I don't expect you to respond to, the specifics of Loveall's complaints, but
Yep.
in the 2 complaints were that he allegedly described a woman as looking like a stripper because of her body language, and he also has repeatedly used religious language in the workplace. So I guess maybe a different attempt at that question would be like, what kind of behaviors would you try to display as a county commissioner?
I would say if another county commissioner is describing another person as a stripper and they're too old to have their mouth washed out with soap, that they should be censored, that everybody should say, come on, watch your language, you're a county commissioner, stop acting like a teenager. That is like real minor stuff. We've got serious problems, and that's somebody probably trying to make some money off a lawsuit is my guess. What was the other one?
The other one was repeated Christian references in the workplace.
There's a separation of church and state, but we tolerate Muslims wearing headgear and people wearing crosses or saying prayers. We used to have to say prayer before lunch when I was in grade school. Also, when I was in grade school, we had to learn a new phrase to the Pledge of Allegiance. We had to learn one nation under God. That got added when I was in the first or second grade. I think they're not making a mountain out of a molehill. I think they are using poor judgment to waste taxpayer time and dollars, that this is the type of side issue that detracts from the real issues that need to be resolved, that this should have been resolved with the public argument or statement or an apology or something a long time ago. I think it's basically the worst side of politics, is stuff going on.
Yeah, well, thank you for the succinct answers. That was what I had prepared. Are there any topics we didn't go into that you want to make sure you
Let's see. Yes. We need about 1 or 2 or 3,000 people 10 years ago, 20 years ago, cleaning up our woods, getting rid of all of these dead trees, and putting in good trees for future generations. Now, what happened in the early 1980s was the Forest Service started catering to farm worker groups, which meant a lot of illegals were coming in. And so the work was being done by migrant labor. Then industry picked it up. We had a depression in the early 80s. And so for the last 40 years, the majority of the work, of reforestation work, and an increasing amount of wildfire work, and an increasing amount of even logging work has been done by people speaking Spanish. We need those people. They need to be paid regularly. They need English lessons. They need to be assimilated. They need a path to citizenship, and we need them to work for 10 or 20 years to get our woods back in shape, and we need to be doing it at market rates so that young people, again, people your age, can go into contracting, go into working in the woods, and making a decent living at it. So it's the lack of employment and the lack of a trained workforce that's the real problem at this point. The other problem is all of the regulations and all the litigation don't allow us to go back to work, but it looks like the administration through the O&C Lands, as a perfect example, is trying to change that. They understand we need to manage our woods in order to keep these fires from happening. We need to manage the woods in order to pay taxes rather than be dependent on them. It would be great for our schools. We need more teachers, more cops, more so on, to be able to handle the additional population. But we need to do something pretty immediate. And if I'm elected, number one, I would rescind the $25,000 raise. That was like crazy. That's like winning the lottery when you're a commissioner. Number two, I would be focused almost entirely on adding thousands of jobs, mostly to our forests, getting them repaired. And number three, I would be focused on adding tens of millions of dollars to our budget for schools, cops, roads, and fewer bureaucrats.
And you believe that if the county and federal government allowed more logging, mm-hmm. that those thousands of jobs and millions of dollars numbers you just mentioned
yep.
pan out?
Absolutely. We did it for 40 years. I mean, we know how to do it. I did it when I was younger. Yeah, it's a proven thing. If we go out there and we harvest the material and we sell it and we pay 25% or 75% into the county. It's got more funding to work with. Those workers are paying taxes. They're not dependent on taxes. They're going to have children. They're going to need schools. They're going to need teachers. Well, wait a minute, we got money coming in. I absolutely know that would happen because I lived it for decades. From the time I was in the first grade until the spotted owl. It was pretty easy to see how things worked. And Lane County has some of the richest timberland in the entire world, and we're burning it up. We're letting it rot. We're putting up gates. We're letting our campgrounds go to crap. We're doing it to ourselves, and we need to stop, and that's why I'm running for office, just to hopefully get these issues out into the public and stop piddling around with ICE and homeless and other sidetrack issues. We've got serious problems that need to be resolved, and I think that's why I'm running.
Can you, I mean, I think a lot of people would object to the idea that homelessness is not a serious issue. Can you elaborate on that?
It's, we didn't have homeless when I was your age. So how did we get all these homeless people? We started having food stamps, Section 8 housing, free tents, free needles. You can get drunk in public. When I was your age, if somebody did that, they went to the drunk tank. If they were mentally ill, which a lot of these people are, they went to the sanitarium. If they were just lazy ass, living off the government, they had to get a job. But they didn't have the option of living off the government before. So this is a self-created problem. Look at all of the people that are getting 5- and 6-figure salaries for taking care of the homeless, and they gather, I don't know, clothes, and then they give them to people, and they ensure that they can stay alive on the streets. That used to be totally illegal. So yeah, it's a problem that we created that a handful of people benefit by, and the people living on the street, is disgusting to say that I live in America and we tolerate this, we let this happen. It could be resolved fairly quickly.
How?
How? Well, I just said it. You take the people that are on the street and you either put them in a home or arrest them, or I guess some kind of public housing. You got stadiums or something, but you do not allow them to do it. So they have to either go someplace else where it's allowed, like sanctuary cities. If you're illegal, you go to a sanctuary city. You don't go to Texas necessarily. If you're a homeless person living on the street, you've developed a lifestyle that we've made possible during my lifetime. I've watched it happen that wasn't possible before. So what did we do to keep people from living on the sidewalks before? We made it illegal, no loitering. We put them in the drunk tank if they were stoned, and a lot of these people are obviously stoned, and we put them in the hospital if they're mentally ill, and a lot of these people are mentally ill. So it's a matter of systematically going through the population of those people and saying, okay, stop hanging out at St. Vinny's, stop living off government welfare, we're going to have to train you to do a job, or we're going to have to put you out in a home. And we used to have country homes, poorhouses, and people would be gardening, and they would be away from the rest of the population.
I mean, you mentioned, connecting people with jobs there in your answer. Like, do we have the jobs for these people?
Look out in the woods. We've got jobs for thousands of people. Yes, we're not doing those jobs. Yeah, all those snags need to be felled, broadcast burned, trees planted, campgrounds reopened, trails fixed, roads maintained, schools repaired, homes built, all of the above.
You know, I find it interesting that you mentioned campgrounds, because when I was going through, the initial comments I've read on the BLM's plan to increase logging, that has been the main concern, or one of the main concerns I've heard, is that by prioritizing logging, you would have to deprioritize recreation.
It's the opposite. My 4-year degree is in recreation. I hear that kind of nonsense from people that don't know what they're talking about. It's propaganda. It's stupid. We opened up the roads so we could build campgrounds so people could go to them. The campgrounds were directly related to open up there. Blair Lake is a perfect example. Waldo Lake is a perfect example. Without roads, there were no campgrounds. What you're talking about with those people are elitists. They say, I want to go out in the wilderness. I don't want to hear any chainsaws. I don't want to have any evidence of humans around me. I just want to be one with nature, and I want other people to pay for my privilege. And those are disgusting people. Those are the elitists that have created the wilderness areas and really done significant damage to our rural communities and our forests.
You know, I mean, a lot of these decisions you're describing,
Yep.
I think of as federal decisions. So what do you see as the county's role in all of this?
They are federal, and we need to be dealing with them. The 1897 Organic Act said, okay, we're going to manage local forests. We're not going to export. Never talking about exporting to other states. So they're talking about exporting. It wasn't to Canada or anything else. We're going to produce materials for the advantage of the American people. That was the job. The local communities would produce those jobs. And then we're going to give 25% of the income from that, because they're not paying taxes, into schools and roads. When BLM came in 30 years later, 1937 O&C Act, they said, okay, we're going to take back this government land. It was private. It was the Oregon and California railroads, and unfortunately it's in a checkerboard pattern. But we're going to manage it sustainably. So we're going to manage it, and this is what they told the counties. We're going to manage it sustainably. So what's in the 18 O&C counties only, this is county issue, not the rest of the United States, even though it's the Department of Interior, we're going to give them 75% of the proceeds. So there's 18 of us, Lane, Douglas, Jackson, and Josephine, all get an enormous amount of that. The other 14 counties get 1% or 0.5%, or one of them gets 5%. They just get chump change, basically. So it's specifically for those counties. And then the funding is specifically for the county. Now, they changed it to 50% in 1953, and we still got hundreds of millions of dollars. And they used the 25% to build roads and to manage the timbers. So we got beautiful reforestation. I started contracting on O&C Lands in 1970 and 71 in Coos County and Douglas County. Really good foresters, really good work, really good roads. And it's all been abandoned because of spotted owls and pseudoscience, regulations, litigation. And a whole lot of that started right here in Eugene, right in the University of Oregon, and went up to Warner Creek in 1991, and everything has snowballed from there.
Yeah, so I mean, what I was asking there, right, is that, I mean, you explained how the county benefits, but
Yeah.
I guess my question was, you know, say you're elected, what can you actually do to make this vision of reviving the timber industry a reality?
By holding their feet to the fire. The law says, they're defying the law with this. The regulations they said and said are scientific. I'm a forest scientist. Those aren't science, those are regulations. You mix science and politics, and you get politics. They're playing with politics. If we approach these on the science level, the other thing, and the reason I'm running, is we got a new administration in DC. The new administration is pretty wise to this. The whole global warming thing that was supposedly driving these wildfires for 20 years, that was their excuse. Total bullshit. It wasn't global warming. Our climate's been about the same for 500 years, maybe 5,000. To say that it was a warming climate that somehow caused the forest to explode, when the reality was it was an overabundance of fuel that me and others have been talking about for decades, and experts on the topic, not just me, but I am an expert on the topic as well. We watched this all happen. We said, you're going to have catastrophic fires. We've had the catastrophic fires. We said, now let's clean up the mess. And they go, oh no, because it's an LSR, and we've got another acronym. So yeah, I would be pushing strongly to enforce the law and to restore our forests, and attempting to, and that's what I'm doing right here. I'm attempting to make the public aware that these problems are going on. They've been covered up. We've been given phony excuses, and it's time to pull off the facade and go back to work.
Thank you. I mean, that was almost the half hour I asked for, and that would seem like a good ending point if you don't want to add anything.
Well, you're the interviewer, so, and he's the photographer. If my time is done, I'm good. This is the exact reason I'm running, by the way. is to get this kind of perspective into the media, into the discussion, to debate with the others, to write my, I haven't, they told me to print envelopes, they told me I hired their clerk, they told me that I had to go knocking on doors, they told me I should be doing radio ads. I don't have time for that, and it all costs money. I'm on this specifically to do just what we're doing and hopefully having an effect.
Well, thank you for spending
Yeah.
there.